Alrighty, so we are back, and as you can see, it is a new place because I've moved out or moved or whatever you want to call it, and yeah, so it's kind of dark because I've turned off the main light because if you can see, it looks like this. If I turn it on, and if you can just see that it's not really good, and my eye is not even visible, like it's it's worse basically. So I have study lamp on, which is reflecting off of my wall, and that's why you are seeing something like this. Although this is much more preferable, I guess, for me at least. But anyways, I think I'll figure out something else as well for the lighting part. But yeah, everything is visible to me. So and I'm obviously also visible to you. So I think there should not be any problem. And by the way, if you are wondering, yes, we are back with this course only just for today because I wanted to do something, but I was not totally in the condition to do like crazy stuff where start understanding the code and analyzing it and whatever. So I just thought that this module is pending either way, so I'll just finish it. And yeah, so we have this code right here, and obviously I've got it from the downloaded file. Although this is like completely different. Again, as I told you, from from the thing that I'm working on in the project, and obviously I'm not going to be delving that much deeper into Vue and like mastering it or anything, because ultimately my goal is to learn React and start building projects in React and not in Vue. Vue is just something that I was doing because I had to do it, and because it was in like my college project requirement and all. Although I'm not saying that I'm not learning it at all, but it's like I don't want to reach a mastery stage. So yeah, and that is it, I guess. I'll just start with the course and finish this module up. After that, from tomorrow onwards, I'll be definitely be doing like the project and you know understanding a bit of that and all that. Don't mind me, by the way, because I slept at like 2 a.m. yesterday and I woke up at like 6, and then I've been cleaning this room and everything for the whole day today, and now I'm finally here. I was thinking, I am thinking to sleep till like 10:30 or 11 max to max. By the way, I'll also start going to the gym from tomorrow, and also yeah. Anyways, I think enough of the rant. Let us just start with this and finish up this module.
For this, I got a brand new project for you. You'll find it attached to this lecture. Simply download it, extract the folder, and store that folder anywhere on your system as you did it many times before, and you'll notice one important thing. This is a project which I created for you with the Vue CLI. So therefore here, you don't need to create it on your own, you can just use this attached one. It is a project which I created with Vue Create though. I'm attaching it so that we're all using the same project setup. Now in here, you'll notice something interesting. The source folder is pretty empty. There's just a main.js file in there with not a lot of content. So therefore here, I got no Vue code, no Vue app, and no Vue components in there. And I'm doing this on purpose so that we can get started with that together, and you learn step by step how to write Vue code and how to add Vue components in a brand new Vue project like this one. Besides that, we got the public folder with the index.html file, which I already explained in the last module. Now to get started writing code, there are two things which we need to do first. The first one is that we install all the dependencies of this project. So the dependencies mentioned in the package.json file, these dependencies and also the development dependencies. because the attached folder, the attached zip file, has no node modules folder. Not because I forgot it, but because it's super big and the zip file would be multiple hundred megabytes big if I would have added it. That's too big and there is no need to add it because all you need to do is run npm install inside of the project folder. And here's the easiest way of doing that. In Visual Studio Code, in which you should open this attached folder, go to Terminal, New Terminal. And this will open up your default system terminal, your default system command prompt here as part of Visual Studio Code. The advantage is that you don't have to switch to a different screen, and even better, that you're already navigated into this folder. So you don't need to use the cd command to navigate somewhere else. Instead, this terminal already is navigated into this project folder. And therefore, in this terminal, you should now run npm install to install all the dependencies of this project. And whenever you're downloading one of my code snapshots, which you will find throughout the course, you should also run this command if you want to run my code, because all code snapshots attached to any lecture will be missing the node modules folder. So hit enter, and this will now download all the required dependencies and also the dependencies of dependencies, and it will generate this node modules folder and store all the dependencies in there. So let's wait for this process to finish. And once it is finished, we got the node modules folder, and we're now ready to get started running our development server. By the way, you can ignore that this file changed the color here. That's just because I'm using Git, a version control system as well, but you don't need to use that, so you can ignore that. So, as a next step, let's now run npm run serve. This will start this development script, which spins up the development server, and I'm doing this in the same terminal which I used for running npm install, so that I do it in this project folder, which is where you should run this command. And now we got that development server up and running, and we should keep it up and running, as mentioned before, as long as we're writing code. This ensures that any changes will be picked up and we can see them on the serve page. And the serve page will even reload automatically whenever we do change anything. So therefore, we'll keep this up and running, and I'll just shrink it a bit so that it doesn't take up as much space, but I will still have it around. Now we can visit localhost 8080, and that's our running Vue application, and as you can clearly see, initially it's empty. There's nothing here. And the reason for that simply is that...
So I won't be running it for just the sake of, I'll have to install this dependencies and all just for this project, because I'm not going to use it from tomorrow onwards. So yeah, so we'll just go with the course and follow along.
that, well, we don't have anything here. We just got this main.js file, which creates an empty Vue app without any configuration. Well, now that we got all set up, let's dive into writing some component code, and let's learn more about components. Let's come back to the example you saw earlier in the course, about this list of contents. I mean, that is how we got started with components, so that's where I want to pick up. For that, here in the source folder, I will first of all create a brand new file, and I will name it app.vue. You don't have to name it app, but it is a convention to name your main file, which holds your main Vue app configuration, app.vue. .vue is the extension which I'll use so that I can use these single file component features in that file, having a separate template, script, and styling section. I like that a lot. It helps me split that logic and yet have it all in one place, and therefore we will work with such Vue files a lot throughout this course and in any Vue application you're going to build. So app.vue it is, and now in here we can create two of these three sections you saw before. Create a template tag, opening and closing, like this, and create a script tag, opening and closing. We don't need a style tag for the moment. We'll add it later. Now, I will emphasize again, this is not code that would normally work. It's also not a JavaScript file, it's a .vue file. So only this Vue project setup knows how to handle it, and behind the scenes, you will basically transform this all to just regular JavaScript code, which the browser will understand. But we're going to use this setup since for us as a developer, that will make life easier. And now in these script tags, we provide the configuration for our Vue app here. For the app, we want to mount to this div here in the index.html file. So therefore, we create a standard JavaScript object here, and we can also store this in a constant named app if we want to. And in here, we can now add what we learned about. We can add data, we can add methods, we can add computed, we can add whatever we need in this Vue app. Now for the moment, I don't need methods and computed, but here in my main app, I want to add some data, and therefore we'll return our object here as we learned it, and in there have my friends, right? Because that is what we had in the component intro module as well. And there we had two friend elements where every element was just an object with an ID. For example, we had Manuel here with a name, which again could be Manuel Lawrence or whichever friend name you want to add, with a phone number where I'm just going to enter a random phone number here, and an email where I will also just enter a fictional email address. And then we can duplicate this to also have a second friend, and I used Julie before, so I'm going to repeat that name, Julie Jones, also with a random phone number here. And again, this is all really up to you. And here I have Julie at localhost. So now we got data in our app config object here. And if we leave aside how we use this object, because currently we're not using it at all, except for storing it in this constant, if we leave that aside, it's just what we learned, right? We have an object with a data method where we return the data object. So that's all what we learned before as well. Now this should be the config object for our main app here. How do we now get this config object in the app.view file into our create app method in main.js? Well, we're going to use this import syntax here, which you already see here. This is a modern JavaScript feature which we use in Vue CLI created Vue projects to combine different JavaScript files and export a feature in one file and use it in another. For that, we import something from, and then you point at the file from which you want to import. And here you should use a relative import starting with /, which means it's in the same folder as this file, and then the file name, in this case, app.view. The import here looks a bit different. It's not /view here, because here we're importing from a package, from this Vue package. And if you're importing from a package, you just reference the package name. But if you're importing from a custom file, like app.view, you specify the path to that file. Now that ... is not the valid syntax though. Instead, we could import a named export by using curly braces, or a default export. Now you might not know what the difference is. Here, we're going to use a default export by just coming up with any name of our choice here and importing that from that file. And this identifier here is really up to you. It could be hello, it could be something, but typically you name it just like the file was named, because in there we have our main app configuration, so I'm going to name it app here as well. And this is now what we pass to create app, because app, what we import here, should just be this JavaScript object, this Vue config JavaScript object. However, at the moment we're not exporting this here. To export it, we should rather not store it in a constant, which would only be available in this file and not in any other file, but instead we use a syntax which is also default modern JavaScript. Export, the export keyword, and then the default keyword. And this tells JavaScript that this object here is the default export of this app.view file. And that means that whenever we import like this, we're going to import that default. So we're going to import that object. So we're sharing this object from the app.view file to the main.js file, and therefore in the end we pass this config object to create app here. And we're splitting this in multiple files just to organize our code and to make every file focused on a certain task, and therefore the overall project more readable, which will really shine if you're building bigger, more complex projects. So now, long story short, we got our app config object here. Now you'll notice one thing. This Vue app, which we create here in the end, has no template. We mount it to the div with ID app, but this is an empty div. Now if we would have something in there, like a H2 tag, we could, for example, use Vue features in there. That's what you learned. But in Vue CLI created projects like this is typically not what you do. You leave that index.html file alone. Instead, that is what we have this template section for in a .vue file. Here, we can now define the template of this Vue app. So here, we could now add a H2 tag and say, my friends, and then below that, for example, add an unordered list where we want to output all those friends here, like this. And we could also wrap this all into a section if we wanted to. So we can write our HTML code for this script here. And this is just regular HTML markup. Now if we save that all, and we go back to the page, localhost 8080, with the development server up and running, this page automatically updated without you reloading it to show our app content. So to show this parsed and rendered template which we defined for our main app. And that's how we work with those .vue files and with a project setup like this. Now this has nothing to do with components thus far, that's just a different way of creating our Vue app, but it's important to understand this because we will create components basically in the same way. So let's do that as a next step. Let's add our first component in the setup before we then really dive into component communication. So let's now add our first component, because this is just our main Vue app. But I mentioned before in the component introduction module that in Vue, you have both. You have Vue apps and you have Vue components. And every component is like a mini app where you just have the possibility of combining multiple components into one app, and where eventually, covered in the next module, those mini apps, those components, will also be able to talk to each other. And you'll be able to build complex user interfaces by combining different components together. Now it is a convention that you create a new folder, not a file, name components in your source folder to hold your components. Simply just to make it clear that these are now components and not just any Vue app. Now in here, I'm going to add my new friend contact.view file to hold the friend contact component which I want to create. You might remember that is the component we created in the component introduction module. Now, if we have a look at the file name, just like with app.view, I want to make clear what's inside of this file. It will be a component, otherwise it wouldn't be in the components folder, but it will be the component for displaying a friend contact. You could name this whatever you want. You could also just name it just contact. But since I plan on naming the component, the custom HTML element, friend contact, I want to reflect this in the file name as well. And you could also name it like this. This is the so-called kebab case naming convention, but it is more common to use this Pascal case naming, where you have one word, possibly consisting of multiple words, where you start every word, including the word inside of the word, with a capital character. Now inside of friendContact.view, since it's a view file, we can again create our template area here, and also our script area, just like before. And again, in the script area, I'll export a default object. This will be the configuration object for this component. Because keep in mind, an app component is like a small view app. It takes the same configuration object. So of course we need to export one. Now in the component introduction module, we then added a template key here to define the HTML code of this component in a string. We don't need to do this anymore. We now got this template area in friendContact.view file. And that's exactly why we use those .view files. It makes it much more convenient to create such components and define their templates. We don't need to do this in JavaScript strings anymore, where we get no autocompletion, and which is really just not fun. So instead here, I'm going to create my component markup. So that's the same markup I used in the component introduction module. A list item, and in there an HQ tag, where I output the friend.name, and then also a button below that, where I said show details, though we're soon going to make this dynamic. And then a nested unordered list in here, like this. Oops, like this. Where we then have two list items, one for the phone number, one for the email address. And here I have a strong tag where I say phone. And then here we output friend.phone. And on the second list element, we say email. And then we output friend.email. That's just the same markup we used before in the component introduction module. Now for this to work, we need to add the data field again here and return some data for this component, which is now specific to that component and only to that component, so which is independent from our main view app data. And there we had the details are visible property, which initially is false, which we'll use to make this button work and toggle this list. And we had a dummy friend property, which we'll later replace, but where for the moment I will just store manual so that we can output something here. Again, that is something we'll change later though. And now we will also need to add methods here in our config object and add a toggle details method here to set this details are available to what they're currently not. And here I'm already getting better IDE autocompletion simply because we're in such a .view file and we got the VTour extension installed. So that's already one first advantage in action, which we have just by switching to this project setup with this extra view extension. Now we can connect our template here and add a click event listener to the button where we trigger toggle details and add vif here on the unordered list and check if details are visible is true and only show this if it is true. And now we got the finished friend contact component. Now we register it just as you learned it in the view component introduction module. In main.js, we create our app. We can store this app in a constant and call mount on this app, but then we can also call the component method here. And again here, I'm now getting auto-completion, by the way. The IDE suggests me that there is a component method, and it even tells me which arguments I should provide. And we provide a name, friend contact, and as a second argument, the config object for this component, which lives in a different file and therefore needs to be imported. So I'm importing friend contact from /. Now we need to go into the components folder, and in there we have friend contact.view. So that's the import path we need here to reach the friend contact.view file. And friend contact, now again in the end, just points at this JavaScript object which we're exporting in the friend contact.view file. And that's now what we pass as a second argument to the component method. With that, we unlock the friend contact component in our app. So we unlock this custom HTML element. And now in app view, here in our unordered list, we can add friend-contact as often as we want.
Okay.
And here I'll add it twice. And if we saved it all, it'll rebuild, and on our connected page, we'll see our components. Without the styling, because for the moment the CSS code is missing, but we see our components, and it works just as before. Now, of course, it's pretty ugly like this, so let's next also see how we add styling here, before we then ultimately learn more and new things about components.
I think what I had done was not totally similar.
So let's now work
This is
on the
going
styling,
to
because
a bit of React way, basically.
at the moment this is quite ugly. There are different ways of adding styling, but I will show you the way you will most commonly use and which is the recommended way. You might remember that in our .vue files, we not only had a template and a script section, but we could also add a style section. Now, adding it is optional, as you can clearly tell. It worked without it too. But here, you can define the style of your app or component. So here I added the style section in app.vue, and attached, you find the styles CSS file, which we used before in the component introduction module. You can simply download it and then copy all the styles you find in there and add them here between these style tags. Save your code thereafter, and if you now reload, you should have some styling back. Still not the final styling, but better than nothing. Especially our components don't look too bad. Now to also improve the overall styling, here in the app view template, I'll wrap this h2 tag here into a header, like this, and actually also convert it to h1 tag. And if we save that, this now looks better, and now we got our styling back. Now, there is actually more you can do with that styling here. You can, for example, later also lock it to a specific component to make sure that only that component receives the styling, but that's something we'll explore later. For the moment, the styling added here will do the trick. And with that, we now have a nicer project setup where we get this realistic development server where the app automatically reloads whenever we save a change, and where we also get better IDE support, and in general, have a setup which will not only work for small apps, but also for bigger apps.
Cool. So that is going to be it. And okay, this is just related to mm, mm, mm. Okay, anyways, it's just an alternative. And yeah, there you have it. We have completed 7 sections or 7 modules in this course, and I think I have benefited from it whatever I could. Now I'll just focus on my project because I only have this week to complete my Viva and stuff, and after that, I will not be continuing it because, or at least not be continuing it like legit seriously, because I do not want to be a Vue developer. As I said before, I want to not delve, dive more deeper into React. So yeah, that is going to be it, honestly. And from tomorrow onwards, hopefully, things will be settled, and I will get back to my project, and you'll be able to see it a bit by bit, or maybe I'll just do these. I'm not really sure, but yeah, that is going to be it for today, day 34, I guess, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So yeah, there you have it. I'm going to go to sleep because I'm really really tired. Worked all day and traveled as well. So yeah. Anyways, hope you have a great day or night if you are watching. And yeah, bye bye, and I'll see you tomorrow. Signing off.